Yeah.
Nice. They give you a lot of space.
Many online spectators.
7.
7. Okay, but the excitement has clearly died down.
I'm going to call the meeting to order. If you could rise for the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, now if you can take the roll.
Wonder Jeff, here, Ibar,
Here.
Fine,
Here.
Warren.
Here.
Palmer.
Here.
Persky. Here.
Everett.
Here. As a courtesy to the members of the audience and the Board of Education, please place your audio on mute until you wish to speak. Public will only be able to speak during public comment is signed up. I'll remind everybody here to turn our cell phones off. Public comment, any person wishing to address the board may speak at this time. Any person wishing to address the board should sign up through Google Doc provided. When it is your turn, the board president will call upon you and your ability to speak via Zoom will be allowed. Presentations are limited to 5 minutes. I have received no public comment this evening. So, can I have approval of the agenda?
So
All in favor?
Yes.
Great. Reports agenda. So we're going to go with board members' reports. I'll start with Kim.
Just more gratitude for how things are going. I know it's a learning curve. We had it in our own family this week. We had a kid who went in and got tested and thank goodness was fine, but just working through that and the swift response from staff and administrators when I call and go, what do? I know I've read the policies, approved the policies, but what do I do? It's like a panic, and they were right on it and they were awesome. And that just comes from the leadership here. So thank you so much for continuing to support your staff and your administrators and carrying out a very new experience for everybody. Thank you for that. That's all for me.
Excellent. Chris.
spoken to a handful of teachers and students. Luckily, every night for the past 5 weeks, I've been at the Little League fields, so volunteering there, so you get some good interaction with people. And it just for very little negative. I've asked some teachers how they're settling in. And as discussed before, they're finding those best practices. They're working their way through the classroom. The administration is guiding, and just the kids are getting it, the teachers are getting it, and as demonstrated by Grandville's grit and determination, they continue to find the best way to do it. I would hold this district up to as a model to any district in the state. So that's it.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Oh,
Yeah, that's good. I like what you said, because it's a model for sure. I'm very confident about it. It's good time. I have had a chance to talk to the union, interviewed for my role of candidate for the school board. And it was interesting, some of the questions they were, to answer about what was their priorities and what they see most important during COVID. I feel fortunate that I was able to get their recommendation along with this. So that was good to have support from the union. But they all sounded very positive, that yes, there's going to be challenges, but being able to address them and feel confident in what they're are struggling, but they're getting by. They're finding the help they need. It seems like it's very available to help people who
Excellent. Jason.
I spoke to a lot of parents over the last couple of weeks. A lot of them are very thankful that we were able to do in person schooling, start off the year. That they've seen their other friends and around the area who have started out at home. We're very thankful we were able to start off in person. So I think that was a great job by, again, the staff and the administration to be able to make that happen. So again, hats off there. Went through the high school and middle school open house, which was interesting online, right? And getting hand off the parents that were able for the teachers that were able to pull that off, right? There's something new and a different way of doing it.
So how did they do it?
How did they do it?
Yeah, like.
Just like they normally would, but just online.
Okay.
Yep, so, yeah, they just, different, you click into their room, if you will, through Google, and it just, worked out fine. So it was neat to be able to see the teachers and, just have a little interaction there and to meet those folks. Been to a couple of sporting events. My youngest is running across the country. So been to a couple different sporting events at different, locations. And, it's good to see most of the parents are following the guidelines that require you to wear masks and so forth. So, which obviously is a very important thing, to be able to help stop the spread of the COVID. But, really good to see the community kind of rallying around it and supporting it, and making sure that we're taking care of each other as a district, and, viewing it as one big family. So, a lot of good stuff going on.
First.
I just wanted to mention how much I enjoyed the links, Raj, that you sent us. The Learning Center looks great. All the media attention that we got from Channel 8 was really fun to watch. And special shout out to Max Hungry. I think that's really cool that he did. I'm sure the teachers appreciated that immensely, and I'm sure his parents are really proud that he would take the initiative to do something like that. I just thought that was really cool. So good for him for being recognized for that.
Awesome. Just want to mention, I've been attending some, obviously, tennis matches, and so I've been making my way around the OK Red Conference also. And so it's been interesting to get the feel and vibe for other districts also. So there's a lot going on. And so with my work also with the Mental Health Foundation, just seeing the different ways that people are learning, people are going to class. I've definitely gotten a lot of great reviews for us for that poll, and so that's a good thing. In addition, it was a pleasure to be on Wood TV for the interview, and I really Lori Koza, so I want to thank Lori to be part of the interview, and then in addition, we thought it would be fantastic to get the student, so for heavily blended assistance. Extremely big participant in Be Nice, and she did a really good job just before how they're doing at the high school. So they're feeling good. Lori gave a lot of great information about the vibe, the feel surrounding mental health, and I know that we are considering that a priority. I know John is working hard on that, making sure that people know where to get resources. I commend Lori Koza and the rest of the counseling staff for lending expertise and just a great ear right now to folks. I know that it's not just the kids, it's also our staff. Do I worry? Of course, I worry, but I also know that there's a lot of good people that you can talk to. In addition, Lori also did a fabulous job at creating a resource list for staff, so people know where they can get help and assistance if they are struggling with anxiety, with stress, with a lot of different things. Is there something wrong?
Sorry, the scrolling of the button.
Oh, subtitles.
It's converting.
Oh, I was like, what is it talking about? It's talking about lending expertise and mortgages. I was like, what is going on? Sorry.
So, it's a good thing, and, yeah, to Kristen Buck, it's really good to have, y'all get an endorsement from such an important organization within our district. And so, that's a good thing for us as a school board too, that is very reflective of, our commitment, and, I appreciate both of you very much. Roger?
Okay, it was very good to hear Cora's perspective of things. That was very enlightening.
Her dad was eating lunch outside, right behind us. It was good.
Good to hear a student perspective.
Eating his apple.
Before we start, this is the board meeting where we do our financial audit, but before we start with that, I just want to say, try to pick somebody out, and who I'd like to pick out this time is our staff in general, not one person. But, their jobs changed. Their jobs are not the same, and that can be very difficult for people. And I gotta say, I am so proud of our staff for showing up, for working so hard in something that's very different for them, making mistakes, learning from those mistakes. When you are somebody, which they are, somebody that cares so much about kids, and you know that the best practice is kids being in person with you, and you can't do that for kids. And it's harder to build relationships, it's harder to, to just talk to a kid informally and so on when not everybody's here. That's a huge challenge, but I have to say, I am so proud of our staff for showing up. Yes, it's hard, and there are things we're all going through that we can't. I told somebody today, that's my biggest thing I struggle with is I can't help you with this situation because we all are living this situation, this reality, and we can't make it go away right now. So knowing that, how can we help each other? How can we support each other, lift each other up, and do everything we can to help each other help our kids. So I just want to say I'm just so proud of each and every one of our staff because once again, they've stepped up and they've been, so I just wanted to point that out.
I want that reaction button.
Yeah. There you go, there you go.
Maybe the applause.
Yes. So, and now, it's time for our financial audit, and I'm going to turn things over to Heather, and she will introduce our guest who you can't see, but you certainly will be able to hear, I know. So take it away, Heather.
Sure. So, our financial audit this year is completed by Yo and Yo, and what the individual I want to introduce is Michael Mcdonald. He works in the business office downstairs. He's been here since February, and he took the lead on the audit this year, which was a lot of work, and it was very helpful to me because of all the other stuff we were doing this summer. So thank you, Michael. And also, we're gonna turn it over to Carol Patridge and Michael Everard from Yo and Yo, and they'll do the presentation online here in just a second. Okay, Walter? Mm-hmm. Michael, can you hear us all right?
Can you hear us now?
Yep, I can hear you, Carol.
Perfect.
Looks like Mike's on mute. Oh, there he goes.
Hello, I'm here now.
Well, thank you, Heather. And I want to thank Michael too, because both Roger and Heather and Michael and all the staff over at the school district, because they did a great job of getting things ready for the audit. I think this was probably the smoothest audit that we've had. in the 3 years that we've been working with Grandville. So, and I think a lot of that is just the staff just getting everything ready. We moved it back a week or two this year, which I think helped too, because, well, we'd hoped that everything would be finalized by then, but with all the changes, we still don't have things finalized. So, I do want to thank the staff for everything. It went really smooth this year, and that's to their attributes. So, and I'm going to turn over to Michael, because he did all the work on my end too. So.
Okay, thank you, Carol. Can you guys see the presentation on my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So, first thing, let's see how I get this to advance. There we go. So the first thing I want to mention is if the board members, I'm pretty sure you have the actual reports, you were mailed those last week, and you're going to notice that they say draft on them. And the reason for that has nothing, due to circumstances beyond our control, beyond the district's control. It's kind of a technicality accounting type thing where there's some money that was received from the state that we don't have complete guidance yet on how that's supposed to be handled. MPE is still trying to figure out exactly how this is supposed to be reported. It's new money this year that came as a result of all the changes with COVID and the different funding that was received for that. So until we receive word on the final guidance about how that's supposed to be recorded, we've been advised to not release any audit reports that get this money. Not all schools in Michigan has received the money yet. We've released several reports for other, smaller school districts that haven't taken advantage of the money yet. But so that they do say draft. However, just all the audit results that we're going to discuss as far as how everything went and what our recommendations are, that's not going to change due to anything. It is possible that your total revenue and your total fund balance could change slightly because of this, but it's really hard to say until we hear final. So I think we thought the best thing to do would be to go ahead and present today. And in the event that there is a change, when we get the final guidance, we will let the board know before we finalize. So having said that, got a presentation sort of similar to how we did last year, where we sort of switched the format up a little bit. Again, the first thing that we want to talk about is responsibilities, both of the school district and of us as the CPA firm. So we just want to point out that, again, that all the numbers that we're going to go over later on, all the accounting is done by the district, by the business office. And as auditors, we're not really allowed to come in and help with the accounting. We can do certain things, but we do need to be told about that in advance and make sure that it's allowable, because you're never allowed to audit your own work. So just want to point out that the district is responsible for preparation of the financial statements. And then on the next slide here, this just discusses auditor's responsibility, which basically says that our responsibility is to plan the audit adequately so we can express our opinion on the numbers. Next, we have this slide here that just want to talk a little bit about what an audit is. So Yo audits using a risk-based approach. So what we do is we come in and we obtain an understanding of your internal controls, look at your policies and procedures. We walk several transactions through the process and sit with the staff in the business office and say, okay, I want to write a check. How does this work? And what we do is look for holes in the process and look for areas where things could go wrong. And based on that is how we design our audit procedures. So we come up with areas of high risk and areas of low risk, and we tailor the procedures that way. We are required to test census data that gets submitted to the Office of Retirement Services. So it's sort of like demographic data of all the employees in the district, what their ages are, what wages were, that kind of thing, and make sure that it's that it was accurately submitted, because that has an effect on some of the numbers in your financial statement, the net pension liability and the net OPEB liability. We also incorporate an element of unpredictability into our audit every year. This year, we actually had several elements of unpredictability. Some of it was due to COVID, but we don't want to become too predictable as an audit firm, and where the business office knows exactly what we're going to ask for every single year. And we try to come up with a procedure that maybe we didn't do before, or maybe we're going to do it in more detail this year, that the business office will expect. We also have to conduct your audit in accordance with government auditing standards, because you're a school district. You know, there's certain things that you're allowed to spend the money on and certain things you're not allowed to spend the money on. So that's kind of a separate opinion that you get. We also do certain grant compliance testing, where we will focus on maybe not the major federal grants that we're required to test in the single audit, but some of the smaller grants as well, and there's certain procedures that we do for that. There's also other compliance testing, where that's certain things that Michigan Department of Education wants us to look into in addition to your ISD, so items specific to that. And then at the end, we prepare the financial statements for you. The data collection form is required to be submitted to the federal government. It's a summary of the findings of the audit as well as your federal spending. And then we also take care of the submissions to the federal government, the Michigan Department of Education, and your ISD, just as a convenience to you. And then also, because there's several significant bond projects going on in the district, those are required to be audited separately. So there's a separate bond audit for every time, you know, when you go out for bond passage on ballot, we have to submit a different bond audit as well. So audit's a lot of work. So having said that, on the next slide here, we'll start talking about audit results on the next several slides. You did receive an unmodified opinion, which is a clean opinion, which basically says that all the numbers that we're about to go over are accurate. On the next slide here, a couple slides ago when I mentioned that we are using a risk-based approach and we're required to look into your internal controls and do an evaluation. We want to note that you don't get an opinion on internal controls, you get an opinion on the numbers and that they're free from material misstatement. However, when we go through and we do that evaluation of your controls, if we come across something that we think needs to be reported to the board or oversight agencies because it's a deficiency in your internal controls, we're required to do that. So for financial statement purposes, over financial reporting, we found no material weaknesses or no significant deficiencies noted, which is what you want to see. Because the district gets and spends more than $750,000 of federal funds, we're required to do what's called a single audit, and it's a much more intense audit, and it's mainly compliance driven on your federal grants. So there's some major federal grants you get, like your special education grants, your Title I, Title II type grants. So that's what we're subject to single audit. For this year, our major program was the Child Nutrition Cluster. The past 2 years, we've audited the special education grants. So this is the first time that we've audited the nutrition cluster here at Grandville. You were a low-risk auditee because there's been no findings for several years and certain other criteria. So that means we kind of scale back certain procedures that we do for you. After we audited the child nutrition cluster, you received an unmodified opinion on that, which means that you materially complied with all the requirements of the nutrition grants. There were no material weaknesses or material non-compliances noted. However, we did find a deficiency that we would consider to be a significant deficiency, which is less severe than a material weakness, but is still you know, a significant deficiency that needs to be reported. And this was over the area of eligibility. So we're required to do many tests when we test these funds, and one of them is eligibility, where we have to select a sample and be able to say at the end of the day that the students that are benefiting from free and reduced lunch, it was properly calculated and they're properly receiving those benefits. When we selected our sample, we did find a student where the eligibility was calculated incorrectly. They were receiving benefits, I believe they were reduced where they should have been a full pay. The numbers from the application were, I don't think the numbers themselves were incorrectly entered into the software, but the frequency of the pay was. If I remember right, it was something like they listed their income as monthly and it should have been bi-weekly or something like that. So that did cause a change in the benefits they should have gotten. So that was a finding that we were required to report. And then in the single audit report, the detail that you would have got last week, in there it outlines, gives more information, and then the district is required to prepare a corrective action plan, and that'll be the last page of your single audit report. And basically the reason why the error happened was because there was one person that's kind of doing the work and doing the calculations, and there wasn't a second person to review that. So, you know, we're humans and we all make errors, and errors are going to happen. So to lessen the possibility of errors happening, we'd like to see a second person or you know, somebody reviewing that to make sure you didn't transpose a number or something like that. And that's exactly the corrective action that the district has taken, and they've designated somebody to input those calculations for next year and somebody to review them to lessen the likelihood that this can happen again. On the next slide, some other things. There's what we call the governance letter. It's a formal letter from us to the board and management that has all kinds of things we're required to communicate. So we're going to go through some of those. We do have some significant estimates to report. So those are the numbers, certain numbers in the financial statements that aren't, you know, there's some degree of estimation involved. It's not like a hard 100% number. This is 100% correct. So, and these are probably significant estimates on over 90% of school districts in Michigan, assuming that you participate in MIPSers. So the first one is useful lives of property and equipment. Anytime that you capitalize a piece of equipment, you have to depreciate that over its useful life, and you have to estimate how long you think the asset will last. So, you know, the asset could last 10 years or 20 years. You just kind of have to do your best guess. And so your depreciation expense, there is some estimation involved there. The next two estimates, you might remember this slide from last year if you were on the board last year. We've got these tables, and this is from your pension and OPEB novel disclosures, as I like to call them, because they're about 6-7 pages long in your financial statements. And it lists all the assumptions that have to go into creating this liability. But basically, there's a lot of inputs that go into creating this number. And this is calculated at the state level, and it's audited by the Michigan Auditor General. And then that liability at the state level is divided up into many, many, many small pieces, and every school district in Michigan that's in the plan gets a piece of that liability. So this is nothing that the district does on its own. This is at the state level. So, but having said that, if you think about the different inputs in the plan, you know, right now the liability is X number of dollars, and of that, it's funded to a certain percent. Let's say it's 70%. That money is sitting out invested right now, and the plan actuaries have to come up with how much rate of return do we think those investments are going to earn over the next 30-some years, which is a total guess, educated guess based on history and market performance and everything. But so this kind of shows you in the middle column there, the rate of return that's assumed for the net pension liability investments is 6.8%. That's the number in the middle. And this table is to show you that if you were to take that percentage and raise or lower it by 1%, that's what happens to the liability. So it'll either increase or decrease by over $30 million just by changing that one input. And there are several other inputs that go into creating this as well. So this is just sort of to illustrate that. Some other things we're required to communicate to you. No disagreements with management to report. We had definitely no difficulties in performing the audit. So that would be if we requested support and the support couldn't be found, or if we had questions that couldn't be answered, something like that. And then we had no uncorrected misstatements, and we also had no material audit adjustments. So that's sort of your gold star for the business office, I think, is no material audit adjustments. So as a board, I think that kind of gives you confidence in the reporting that you're getting throughout the year, that's makes you feel better about the accuracy of those reports when you come in and the auditors don't propose any large adjustments. So that was kind of the results. We'll go into some kind of an overview, high level of the numbers. So in your financial statements, we're required to report anything that's a major fund separately, and that just means basically if there's a significant amount of activity in the fund, in layman's terms, I guess. And then, so you've got your general fund is always a major fund. That second column there is your new bond, the 2020 building and site fund. And so those are the two major funds. Everything else was considered to be a non-major fund, so it's reported in one column. If you did want more detail on how that breaks out into the individual funds, you could go look at your detailed reports that you were last week. But that non-major column is your food service fund, the debt service fund, sinking fund, your 2019 building and site, and then there's a new fund this year, which I'll talk about a little bit later, which is the Student School Activity Fund. So we've laid out the total revenues and expenditures for each fund. So we can see in the first column there, the general fund, total change in fund balance for the year was about a loss of $500,000. So we ended the year at about $5.8 million. And we've got some benchmarks coming up on some future slides, so you can kind of evaluate that further. The second column there, you'll see the fund balance at the beginning of the year was 0, since this is a brand new fund. So this fund was set up specifically to track the proceeds from your new bond. That was about $50 million, and then to track the spending of that over the next several years. So every year from now on, that change in fund balance is going to go down, down, down until all of the funds are spent. So at year end, there's about $46 million in the fund yet to be spent. And then in the non-major funds, the total change was a decline of about $1 million. So total fund balance for the district at year end was $58.5 million. On the next slide, we've got a summary of the general fund comparison to budget. So in the first column, we've got your budget that was passed in June of 2019. The final budget, which was passed June of 2020, and then your actual budget or your actual performance, your final numbers at year end. So you can kind of see how those fluctuate. The final budget projected about a break even, $28,000 surplus, and we actually came in $500,000 of a loss. And I do want to mention that with everything going on at the with COVID at the state level, there was a lot of uncertainty in the month of June as to what kind of cuts is the district going to expect to get, as you probably remember when you were receiving those presentations. So I think the district wasn't in a great position to know what their final revenue was going to be. And the final shortfall that the district got was about $1 million within what they were expecting in state aid. There was some other funds that came through in August state aid, but those funds, due to kind of technical accounting type things, they're not allowed to be recorded as revenue until next year. So the shortfall that the district did have to recognize for August was about $1 million, and I know that directly figures into that $500,000 loss for the year. On the next several slides, we've got some graphs. Some of this is just more helpful if you see it in graph form, I guess, just big picture stuff. The general fund, this is a breakdown of all the revenue. So 65% comes from state aid, 21% comes from local sources like property taxes, gate receipts, contributions from the public, etc. And then your next biggest would be the interdistricts, so revenue from the ISD and sometimes other neighboring districts, but usually that's mostly the ISD there, and the other categories are minimal. Here's a pie chart showing your general fund expenditures by object code, so what type of expenditure is it? You can see the orange and blue pieces of the pie add up to about 82%. So 82% of everything is spent on payroll. Purchase services is next biggest in line at only 9%. Capital outlay would be major capital purchases like buses and things like that. So, and that was less than 1%, so very minimal. Here we've got a 10-year enrollment trend analysis to show what your pupil count was over the last 10 years. I do want to note, I know a lot of districts like to go by their October count. That's, when they think of what was my count for this year, they think of October, but you are funded using a blended rate. So it would be 90% of your October count plus 10% of your prior spring. So this is the blended count we're showing here. There's not going to be a huge difference between the two. So you can see for 2020, there was a decline of about 13 students from the prior year. Going back all the way to 2011, the total decline was about 220 over that time period. And this is another one. This graph looks about the same at every district in Michigan, or pretty close to it. It's always, over this 10-year period, it's always on decline. Here's some, there's a few of these are specific graphs that the board has requested in the past. This is a per pupil analysis of your general fund revenues and expenditures. So actually you can see for the first time that the expenditures, the spending is a little bit higher than your for the first time this year, but at about 11,000 for both of those. Here's a graph that shows your general fund balance over time and what that's been doing. So the green line is your total fund balance in the general fund. And then the blue line is the unassigned portion. So basically that means the amount that hasn't been earmarked for something. So you'll see for 2020, your total fund balance is up there at about 5.8, but the unassigned portion is only 2.8. The biggest reason for that difference there is it's about $3 million, and that's your budgeted shortfall for the 2021 budget. So because you've appropriated more funds than what you're taking in for next year, GAAP requires you to assign that fund balance or sort of point out that, hey, we've already got this earmarked for next year. On the next slide, here's some of those benchmarks I talked about. Historically, boards are used to seeing that fund balance divided by expenditures figure on the bottom. For 2020, that was at 9.37%. And then the newer benchmark that the state uses to assess your fiscal health is the fund balance divided by unrestricted revenues. And that was at about 9.85%. So we mentioned last year, the number that you want to really watch out for is 5%. If you ever get below 5%, you're considered to be part of that early warning legislation, and then you're subjected to oversight from either a CPA firm or the ISD. So 5%, you're getting in the danger zone. So this year we ended at almost 10%. Here's another slide that's been requested in the past. This is the foundation allowance, or the amount that you receive through state aid per pupil. This is like that base funding for Grandville in the first column, and then some neighboring districts off to the right. And I'll say this is based on the foundation allowance at the beginning of the year. And, you know, as I mentioned before, there was that revenue shortfall where some of the state aid that was expected to come in was short by about $1 million. And this doesn't take that into consideration. This is just your base level for the year. So, and then just to note down below, the Kent ISD average foundation allowance was about $8,149, which is a little bit higher than Grandville's. So if Grandville was to receive that average foundation allowance rate, that would have resulted in another about $215,000 that the district would have got. On the next slide here, we have a similar graph. This shows your debt millages compared to other neighboring districts. So you can see Grandville by far is the lowest of all these districts at about 3.2 millage rate for debt within the Grandville School District. Here on the next slide, we've got that fund balance as a percentage of expenditures compared with local districts. So this is based on 18-19 because the 19-20 results aren't going to be published for some time for these districts. So we put in 18-19, so it's you know, we're comparing apples to apples here. And again, in the first column there, you can see Grandville at 10.59% and how you compare to other neighboring districts. Down at the bottom, we've got just a note there. The bar chart all the way to the right shows the Class D average. That is districts of similar size to Grandville. So student counts between 5 and 10,000, the average was 14.2%. The next slide, we're showing here what the retirement rate has been doing over time. And the past couple meetings I've said I wish that this graph went out further into the past, and I think we're going to do that for next year just to get even more of a picture. But you can see just since 2009, when the rate was about 16.5%, and what that's done since 2021. So the green line is the unsubsidized rate, and then the blue line is the total rate. So the difference between the green line and the blue line is the amount that the state, that you get from toward this liability that you get in your state aid. So they send you a check for, you know, whatever it is, $1 million for the month, and you have to turn around and give that right back to Office of Retirement Services. So it's money that they're helping you pay down the unfunded liability. So they just started doing that in 2014. That's why you don't see the blue line before that. So the total unsubsidized rate for the current year was 27.5%. And we do want to note that for next year, that is going up again. It'll go up to 28.2%. So that's another 0.7% of rate on every dollar of salaries that are paid. That is an increase in your retirement expense. So next year, 28.2% out of every dollar for salaries is an extra expense that needs to go to help pay down the unfunded liability at the state level. So that's your retirement expense. Have to pay not only the unfunded portion of the liability, but just your actual rate as well. The difference between the 42 and the 28, they call the UAAL, or the unfunded portion of the liability. So that's the extra portion that's being paid to help cover that. So the normal unsubsidized rate is the 28.2. And then I do want to mention just a couple things on this slide. There's in the accounting world in general, the past few years, with all different entity types like nonprofits, there's been a lot of significant accounting standards that have come out where that changes certain things that we need to audit, and then as the accountants in the district, certain things that they need to account for differently. The big one here to note is two of them actually. There is a statement GASB 87 having to do with leases. That was extended again until the 2022 year. It's been extended several times now, so we'll be talking about that in a future year. For this year, the district did adopt GASB 84, which you've probably heard us talk about before. Basically, there used to be funds that you collect for like the class of 2022 or the pop machine fund or something like that. And there's dozens and dozens of these funds that the district holds on to money to be used toward those purposes. The old accounting said those were fiduciary activities. You're holding on to them for other groups. It's not really the school district's money. So it was reported on a statement as an asset for the cash and then a liability for the same amount that was due to the student groups. This new GASB 84 says that's not really how we want to handle that going forward. So the district had to do an evaluation of all the funds that were reported on that statement. And the great majority of them moved into the new fund that I mentioned earlier, was called the Student School Activity Fund. So that's now a special revenue fund where you're recording all the money that's being collected for those purposes as school district revenue, and then all the money that's being spent on those purposes as school district expense, whereas it was not really on the governmental funds statement before. It was on a totally separate statement. So basically it went from one statement to another, and it's now considered, the school district's expense of revenue. There was a small portion that remained in fiduciary activities, but according to its nature, but the huge majority is now in that student school activity fund. So that was what we had for the presentation today. So we'd like to give a big thank you to the board and to Roger and Heather and Michael and everybody in the business office. It was a really great audit for us. We really enjoy working with you guys and getting the opportunity to do your audit. And everything went real smooth this year, and just thank you very much. So with that, that kind of concludes what we had. And if anybody has any questions, we'd be happy to answer those.
I'm impressed, very impressed with our presentation, documentation, and how well you explain things. So I'm going to take 3 questions and get rid of them because you've already answered them in your presentation, Mike. So thank you for that. But I have one more, and this is under the financial statements document, page 3.2. And I don't know if this is a Heather and or Mike, but when we look at on the right-hand side, the statement of net position from operating results, and you look at the difference in increase in net assets, and, you're looking at a 6.3 difference there. But the biggest thing that stuck out to me was the difference between 2019 and 2020 in the support services category. Can you give a brief Reader's Digest explanation to that extra $4 million in expense?
Sure. Give me just maybe 30 seconds or so to pull up that page. Okay, so let me see what you're talking about here.
second bottom right expense, you've got construction and support services of 28.2.
Right.
24.
Yeah, so that is lots of things actually. Can you see my screen again? Can you see this page 3-2 that I'm on again?
Yes.
Okay, so the majority of the presentation I gave was focused on the fund level statements, which are these statements here. The general fund, your new capital project fund, non-major fund, etc. The table that you're pointing out has to do with these statements in the front here, and we don't really usually go over those very much. The difference with these statements up front is they're called the district-wide statements. So it's the operations from back here in your funds. So this is what you're used to seeing as a board. And up here, we have to add and subtract certain things because back here, this is on the modified accrual basis. So you're reporting things that are, I guess it's better to say you're not reporting long-term items. So these statements, you're not going to see any fixed assets or capital assets or any long-term debt. So if I jump back up here, here you've got long-term liabilities of just your normal bonds of about $113 million here, plus your net pension liability of $110 million, et cetera. Now, if I flip back, you're not going to see those liabilities here. It's only the liabilities that are due and payable in the current period. So it's just a different basis of accounting. This is modified accrual, whereas up front is full accrual, as if you were a full business, as if you were a for-profit business. You have to put every single liability or asset on books here. So here's your capital assets, and the other statements you don't do that. So this table here is the same thing, but it's the revenues and expenses. So here is that district-wide balance sheet, I guess you could say, that has those long-term items, and it's sort of the same for revenues and expenses here. So just for example, if your net pension liability of 110 million, let's say last year it was 120 million, so it went down $10 million. Those type of transactions run through your district-wide revenue and expense, which is on this statement. And those are the type of numbers that are the main reason why things fluctuate right here. I hope that makes sense.
Yes.
Okay. There's other things as well, like your debt payments, and any type of long-term item that would be showing up here on this statement. So here, the net change in your net pension liability this year was $9.3 million. So that gets reported up here in these categories. So that's part of the reason, a big part of the reason why it was such a big fluctuation.
Every one of my yellow, you took care of, Mike, so thank you for that.
That's incredible.
Oh, definitely, my pleasure.
That's it for me.
I got
Nice job.
one quick one, the unaccounted revenue from last year that's going to be carried over to this year, is that a significant amount?
Could you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Yeah, we were talking about unaccounted revenue last year that was not reported this past year. Is that a significant amount that's going to be reported for this year?
Oh, it could be a maximum of something like 300,000, I think. It's new grants that was received. It's called it's ESSER, ESSER, stands for something like I don't even want to try and remember what it stands for, but and then there's the CCRF funds, which is the Child Care Relief Funds. It's new money that you got this year, and that's why it's a little bit unclear. So the total funding received was about 300,000. I don't want to say for sure if it's like, I don't want to give any kind of likelihood that, oh, that might, it's a 50-50 as to whether it'll be able to be allowed to be revenue this year type thing. But that would be the very, very maximum it would be.
Thank you.
Sure.
That's all my questions.
Okay.
Here you go, business office.
Everybody shake it off. Wow.
I love the presentation.
It's absolutely totally enjoyable. Okay. Roger,
No business.
thank you very much. Okay, our consent action items, can I have a motion? Support. All in favor?
Yes.
Excellent. Regular action items, 5A, is the elimination of board policy 5517.02. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the deletion of board policy 5517.02, sexual violence. Can I have a motion? Excellent, Roger.
Sure, so policy 2266, non-discrimination on the basis of sex and education programs and activities will be the replacement policy. And you can see that is the very next thing, so that is taking the place of this particular policy. Doesn't it look nice with all the lines drawn?
Yeah.
It is.
Any discussion? Any questions? Okay, all in favor?
Yes.
All opposed? Excellent. Okay. Item 5B, approval of board policy 2266. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve board policy 2266, non-discrimination on the basis of sex in district programs or activities. Can I have a motion?
Support.
Excellent.
And you'll recall the past few readings we've had in reviews of this policy 2266. It's a mandatory policy that memorializes the key requirements of the new federal Title IX regulations. The Department of Ed, Office of Civil Rights, released in the spring in May.
Any more discussion? All in favor?
Yes.
Yes. All opposed? Okay. Next item for a regular action is 5C.
What eight? Oh, no,
5C, life EMS renewal. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the purchase of services from Life EMS ambulance programs for co-teaching of the emergency medical technician course for the 2020-21 school year at a cost of $28,501.14. Can I have a motion? Excellent.
So I'd like to thank Christy Reeder for her partnership with Life EMS. And Heather, anything you want to add about this particular program?
Sure, I included a chart in there for you. This course is in its 14th year here at Grandville. For the 2021 school year, we currently have 23 students enrolled in the program. This will, the students will log some additional hours outside of class, and with that, they'll be able to sit for the state board exam licensed. Regarding how the cost is calculated, we have an agreement with Life EMS each year that it increases by the amount of CPI. And if the CPI is negative, then it just remains flat for that year. So. Any other questions on that?
Fantastic program. Lots of feedback on it.
How many years have we been doing this? Over
14.
It's just 14?
2006.
So 7 was the first year. Okay. I thought it was longer than that.
What makes the fluctuation of the cost?
The consumer price index dictates that, so, yeah, so we usually look at the month of June or July with them, and then we'll take that number, so I kind of tried to highlight it in the last column there. It was 1.8% increase for this school year.
My favorite track post-graduation outcomes with these students that still tracking from medical field into paramedic.
We did that a couple of years ago.
Yeah. Study, I know a few years ago, Scott, do you recall?
Yeah, I think it was hard to get information back exactly. Our information immediately showed a lot of these kids going into the medical field, a lot still post-secondary, and utilizing this training for that. We didn't get, one of our wonderings was how many students utilize this exactly, like Heather said, sit for the state board and immediate school to career type and opportunities.
How many of them do end up sitting for the board?
What's that, Jason?
How many of them do end up sitting for the board?
That's a good question. I don't have that either.
I could, 3 students that I know of personally, one is definitely going into the medical field. One was at Hope College and immediately got a job as a trainer, given that. And I know another student that actually utilized those skills for some life-saving, it wasn't like some life-saving that he did on another person. So as far as the board and where it sits, you know, what they test and the outcome long-term, I can give you 3 personal recommendations. But again, anything I've ever heard about it has been just over the top they tested. So.
My daughter did use her skills 3 weeks ago with me, and it was an appropriate lift. As a jerk man, I mean, and that's sort of back in high school. So she did go into kinesiology.
I know several former students that have taken this course and are in the medical field too. Yeah.
Typically, a lot in the nursing programs are.
Yeah, and anecdotally as well, I've heard a number of
Yeah, that's what it is.
Into the EMT program.
who use the skill through college, right? Whether it's working either as an EMT or in a nursing program, a nurse tech, things that just get them right into something that supports them along the way.
How many programs are like this, do we know statewide?
We're the only one in the area. I know that.
Isn't there one on the other side of the state?
I think there is one on the other side of the state, but I think it's only one.
Right, I think we're one of 2 in the state.
Yeah, all the rest are housed at ISDs.
That's great.
Hey, Scott, do you think starting this year, we can set something up with them and maybe we can do a little tracking?
Absolutely.
So we can look back and say,
Yep.
5 years.
Yep.
My thoughts about it is I've heard a lot of anecdotal stuff too, but I'd love to track it as used for support, not only growth of this program, but other programs in other career pathways. Because I feel like I'm hearing from students more and more that they're wanting the desire to explore and investigate careers related to them industries. And I have a lot of knowledge out there, but this is a great avenue for someone to go from school to career or from school to other opportunities within that track. I know a student who's in it right now who plans on going into Tennessee Valley. This is a great stepping stone and spot for them.
It would be a great exercise too for us to even go 5, 6, 7 years back. I mean, we can set up some tracking with this year's group, but let's try again. Let's go back and see what kind of connections we can come up with again. It'd be fun more than anything.
It was kind of interesting, and ambulance runs.
Yeah.
They have to do. That, yeah, dropping them off like at midnight. My daughter, it was interesting, she came home one night and she wanted a lot of action. I mean, she wanted like a riot, which probably not happening this year. And she said, she calls me now, Mommy, you would love this because all of these calls were about mental health. And it is really interesting, the other experience they get also as they see like this realistic picture of what EMT is really sometimes all about. So that first response call is many times when somebody is in a mental health crisis. So good stuff. It was really interesting with this fluctuating numbers also, because back in, it was 2013, the instructor actually had a heart attack and he passed away. And
He was on the boat. Remember, he had
It
to
was
come
on
up
the
the
Memorial
boat.
weekend, well, he drove into the water, right? The
Yeah,
waters were really
okay,
cold.
yeah.
But, that was quite a loss, and he was a huge part of that program. So, I distinctly remember when he passed away, it was shocked, disappointed, and really sadness. Anyway, are we ready to vote? This is over 20,000, so let's take a look. This we will vote.
Yes. Or,
Yes.
I vote.
Yes.
Line.
Yes.
Or,
Yes.
Hershey.
Yes.
Yes. Excellent. Okay, so now we've got some discussion items, and first one, 6A, fall 2020 board policy revisions. Reading 1.
Yes. So other than the Title IX piece that we did, it was a special edition. This is the fall 2020 board policies that come before us. And I have a summary here. Just want to go through the summary. I did send this in your board update, so you do have it there, and you do have a copy in front of you. But summary, the first one is actually not even a policy, it's a resolution to grant emergency powers to the superintendent during the 2020-2021 school year. You may recall, we passed a true policy back in, I believe it was April, to do this same thing. And this just extends that throughout the year, should there be some things due to circumstances where I have to make some emergency decisions. Obviously, I would inform you of what I was looking to do and so on, but it just grants that through the remainder of the year. If you think I'm goofy as can be and won't be allowed to have that power anymore, as time goes on, the resolution does say you have that right to say, whoa, wait a minute. So just want to let you know that, but it does grant emergency powers should those, as I mentioned, those circumstances pop up when we have to make some quick emergency decisions. And I never do that in isolation anyway. We have a great team, and we all talk together and when those situations arise. So I never do it in a vacuum, and obviously I would ask you for input as well. So, that's the resolution that's there.
Ask a question.
You bet.
So, it's very similar to the one we did in April,
Yes.
and we can still stay with the policy of a second reading. Is there a need? Do the other board members still want to have a second reading, or do we just adopt this this evening? Thoughts? We can do 2 readings.
I'm okay with the second reading personally.
Okay, all right. Just
I
want
mean,
to
there's
ask a
some,
question.
yeah.
I'm fine with either one. We're already under, we're still. under-
No, I meant with this one.
Oh, okay.
I just meant with this one, not
Just
all
the
these.
one.
But that's okay, we can do 2, we can do a second reading, I just wanted to bring this suggestion.
And then the next one, policy 4362.01, directing behavior towards staff members, and that's a revised policy. And if some people were asking for further clarification of what directing behavior is, so this policy defines that. So you'll note that when you read it. Policy 5610, removal, suspension, expulsion, and permanent exclusion of students, and the due process rights that follow the policy 5611. The 2 policies really focus on and implement within them that the evidence standard is the preponderance of evidence. And that is what, just so you know, that is what we always use in our investigations anyway, is the preponderance of evidence. So that's why these 2 came before you. If you notice what's in green, you'll see that those terms and the information regarding preponderance of evidence is very clear there.
So it's just clarity of what that is.
Yes.
We've still been utilizing
Yes.
these same practices, it's just
Yes.
now they're defined.
Correct. Just more defined. And then policy 7440, facility security. As you look through this, there are some various things in here. I looked at our current policy, and again, this one is a revision. Our current policy has all of this documentation except for two things. The very first paragraph, which talks about buildings constitute the greatest financial investment of the district, and I would disagree with that, by the way, I think it's our staff, but buildings are important. It is in the best interest of the Board of Education to protect the district's investment adequately. Buildings and equipment owned by the board shall be protected from theft and vandalism in order to maintain the optimum conditions for carrying out the educational program. So it's a statement saying, because those are a great asset, it's a statement of what the board's responsibility is. I do believe that would be good to add from this policy. Everything else that's marked with an X, we already have. And I would say, if you look at C is blank, that also should have an X on it. Should we have a board-sponsored or board-controlled school district event using our stuff? The part I do have a problem with, and I think it's really up to you guys to chime in, but the superintendent is authorized to install temporary door locking devices as permitted by law in order to protect the health, parent safety of students. So that's talking about those temporary things that, like, you might put into a door jam or something. We've spent a lot of money and are spending a lot of money on high quality systems for our doors. And Mr. Martin, why don't you chime in for a minute on what your thought is on that? Maybe we'd be interested in hearing that.
So I'm strongly opposed to that green there. So the temporary door locks that he's referring to are, I'll give you the Reader's Digest version, is referred to as barricade devices. The problem with those devices is that they violate a number of codes. So NFPA 101, which requires single egress, a barricade device of that type requires two types of motions to get out of the door. It also violates, a lot of those devices also violate American with Disabilities Act. And the reason for that is they're often on the bottom side of the door. And you can't have anything within 10 inches of the bottom side of the door with the American Disabilities Act. And the reason for that is so that wheelchairs and walkers don't get caught up on that. In addition to that, the American with Disabilities Act says that you cannot have bigger than 1 inch, half inch in the floor. And some of those devices out there also have that bigger than half inch. So that's so that somebody with a disability doesn't get a cane or something in the floor. So the National Association of Fire Marshals has also come out against any type of barricade devices. OSHA also is against the barricade devices, no lock to prevent free escape, which is what those do. The biggest thing also in addition to that is that when there's a problem inside the classroom, if there was a threat in the classroom and that threat decided to lock that door, that makes it very difficult to get in from the exterior, so a first responder can't get in. There's many products out there that do meet those code requirements. The biggest thing that they say with these barricade devices is that they're cheap. So, but being cheap does not make them correct. When there's code compliant products out there, and again, when we're talking about security like we did for our bond, the Ryder mentioned that we're going to be putting some security devices that are appropriate and code compliant. These absolutely should not be used.
So
I guess I'm confused because this talks specifically about getting the approval. So I hear what you're saying. And I guess what my point be is before we use them, you have the approval before with the local fire department, law enforcement agencies, and the court. So what I guess I'm trying to figure out what we're talking about. I mean, what you're saying, no, let's not use them, and this is unless it passes it, because there are ones that do pass it. Well, if we're going to go through the process of getting it checked out to make sure it passes it. This would be something
you would be giving me authorization. If I decided I wanted to put these in, then the policy would authorize me to do that. We don't plan on doing that because we already have safety systems we have in place or are putting in place. This, I believe this policy, the reason why it was created is because somebody fought the laws, and now they're saying you can do it, the district can do it, but they have to get approval from the local fire department and law enforcement agencies, and it talks about the inspections to do it. So you have to get that anyway.
Yeah.
But I think this is for people that probably already have installed them.
Okay.
Is my hunch. I say, you know, it's my opinion that we shouldn't check this because, number one, we don't plan on putting these in. And if we did, we'd be having a lot of discussion, I think, at this level, talking about that and whether we should or shouldn't. Again, I think this was put in place because I know some people either install them or plan to install them. And I think, although the codes are there that Chris mentioned, legally, there was a ruling that said, well, you can keep them, but you have to have a policy, you have to authorize your superintendent to be able to do it pending fire department and law enforcement approval.
What I can tell you is a lot of the maintenance directors and superintendents that have installed them regret installing them. And they have also been forced to remove them as well from different fire marshals. Thanks, Matt. So the different fire marshals have forced people to remove the technically illegal barricade device. So I mean, more coming against this OSHA, NFPA 101, and ADA. What's happened is that these products are kind of flooded into the market, and it's a knee-jerk reaction. People have put them in and then been forced to remove them. That's the problem.
So this is just this is Neola's generic suggestion to put in.
If you want to.
If you want, but we don't necessarily, we have to decide
Right, there's no
based
action.
on what Chris is telling us, we don't want it.
I would
What
recommend,
you're telling us.
yeah, I would recommend that we implement the first paragraph that's checked. Everything else is identical to
Okay.
what our policy is. The only thing that's different is the thing we just mentioned about temporary barricades that I don't think we need to check. So I'm just, again, making that recommendation that we don't check that, because if we decided we were gonna do something like that, it wouldn't be like I'd say, hey, Heather, John, and Scott, load up the truck. Let's go get them, put them in, right? We'd have a lot of discussion and so on to get that approved, so I don't think it's worth it.
Neither do
All right, and then the last policy there, 8450.01, that comes a little late for us, so protective facial coverings during pandemic, epidemic. Again, this is new. There were districts asking for policy, their boards wanted to have a board policy regarding the mask. You know, in our current situation with the return to school roadmap and the phases, we already have something that guides us. We've already developed a plan that we've submitted, 2 plans that we've submitted to the state that guide us. I really don't see a need for this policy either, but it is here in transparency like the previous one for you to see. And if you decide you want to have this policy during this time, that's fine. I think we're going very well with our plan that we've submitted and that roadmap in the phase we're in, and I think people are doing what they need to do. And I'm not sure at this point we need a board policy. If I do, you know, if you decide that that's what you guys want to do, is not have this, then if I thought we needed one, I would come back to you, but I just don't see a need at this time.
You think what's in here is what
It's
we
the same.
do?
It's the same that's in our plan, and we've committed to, and you've approved those 2 plans. So I don't, if it were July and we decided to roll with this, I would say that would be something to consider, but we already have those plans in place, so.
Am I not having issues?
What's that?
Am I not having any issues?
I don't see us having anything that we haven't been able to have discussion on with people. It's been very good. Our kids, our parents overall have been great. And if there are times where we've had to remind, we do. And I think people have been great about it.
So how's the dashboard working? Is it helpful or?
I think the dashboard will be, it's a helpful thing, but it's a very delayed figuring out the state one.
Yeah,
It's not accurate. We are working with the ISD to have every district create the here and now dashboard that they have, so people can see that and see the different districts in our area on that. The state one's lagging data, and the data that came out today was really, I mean, some of the stuff that's on there was from 3 weeks ago. So I think they're just trying to catch up with it. And I think that's why we're looking for something that might be more here and now. So, yeah.
So do we want to eliminate that or go for the second read with that and then take it out?
Yeah, that's guidance from you guys.
Do we need to take it out? What are we talking about?
The last policy on that.
I think we should go with the second.
Okay, we'll go for a second read and then we'll eliminate it all.
Sorry.
All right, stay to what we started.
Yep.
Okay, cool. And then the update.
Yeah, so tonight we have a remote learning update, and Dr. Merkel's going to give you an update along with, I know, at least one of two of our great teachers. All right, super.
Yep, and Walter's going to bring them up, and I won't spend long. Stacy Bile, and who is one of our 4th grade remote teachers and a teacher leader in our remote world, and Brittany Austin, who is one of our kindergarten remote teachers. I just want to have them share just a couple of things, but before I turn it over to them, I just reiterating that all remote learning was such a huge undertaking, the way we decided to do it. And we're so proud that we've done it right for a couple of reasons. Number one, the overwhelming comment that we hear from parents is how appreciative they are that they have the option and opportunity to have remote learning with our Grandville teachers. As expected, our biggest challenge has been technology, continues to be technology when that happens, but we're really getting into a groove, and people have been patient, people have been understanding, and doing really, really great things with that. And like I said, parents are just appreciative of this opportunity. Our teachers in the remote world deserve huge thanks and recognition. They are absolutely working their tails off for kids and for families, and it's just so different, and they are embracing that and working with it and rolling with it, and not without certainly some sweat and tears. I don't know if we've had any bleeding yet, Stacy, but certainly the other things. And then finally, the other thing, K-6, we have almost 700 remote learners. And the other thing that we'll bring an MTSS update later, but Jason Glarum deserves a ton of credit too. He put together something for us. Every year through our MTSS process, we take very seriously the screening of all of our students. And we weren't quite sure how we were going to do that with a remote world, but we did it. We brought them here, those that were willing. We did it online for those who were uncomfortable with that. And we got somewhere just around 100 that we're missing and still trying to connect with. But this is a feat that other districts would not even attempt to tackle, and it's going to give us great data. We're going to move forward. We're going to talk about where all these kids are and how we can continue to meet their needs in a remote world, and we're excited. And really, it just shows the work of what our teachers have done is what Roger said from the very beginning, is that we wanted to create something that mimicked our in-person learning in a remote world. And it's not just logging into a product, it's connecting with our people. So Stacy, I'm gonna turn it over to you, and then I'll let you turn it over to Brittany.
All righty. Yes, I thought about using one of my cool backgrounds, but you wouldn't have known who I was. It is really going pretty well. It's been, I'm not gonna lie, pretty brutal. The first couple weeks were rough, and getting through I have appreciation for tech people like I've never had before, because teaching kids where the X on the screen is exhausting, but the kids are really coming along, and they love seeing each other every morning. They cannot wait to interact. I think that, to me, I actually asked parents for feedback last week, and they said their kids are so excited to see each other and interact, and they're getting time to do that. They're getting time to know their teacher. We have teachers who are creating opportunities outside for the kids to get together. They're just doing a ton of cool things together that have been just really good for the kids. And we are following the exact curriculum. It was funny. One of my students, for certain reasons, had to return to in-person. And I was communicating with the teacher and just said, this is where we're at. And they're in the exact same spot. So our kids are able to, for whatever reason, it's more appropriate for them to be in person, or for them to need to come into remote because their family situation has changed. That has been huge. I've gotten to know a ton of my families by delivering materials. The teachers are just killing it in terms of the time. It's been 50, 60, 70 hours. Easy the first few weeks. I keep telling Scott, maybe we'll get a weekend coming up here soon. So hopefully we will. But yeah, it's been amazing for the most part. And yes, it's been very bumpy, but people have just risen up, and we've banded together, and we work together, and we're working out the tech. And there's things we can't control, the internet families have, and 4 families on the internet. I think families thought it would be kind of like last year. So they didn't realize what it would be like to have 4 families on the same bandwidth at the same time trying to interact with their teachers. So I think if anything, it's been internet issues. Tech has been great. If there's been a broken Chromebook, within a day or 2, we get a Chromebook and we run it out to the kid, or if the parents have transportation, they pick it up. And we're working on meals for families that need it. So we're trying to work out all the pieces of the puzzle, and it's coming. We're at week 5, we're gonna get there. And the teachers have also just put in a ton of work in the last couple days of accumulating all the things that they do and the schedules and what the kids need, so that if the district has to go remote, we now have a handbook for each grade so that we can push that out, and they will already learn from the many mistakes we may have made. So go ahead, Brittany.
All right, can everybody hear me? Are we good? Can you hear me? Okay, awesome. All right, so like Scott said, I teach remote kindergarten, and I have 28 4, 5, 6-year-olds that log on every morning to see me. And I think that's my favorite part about teaching this age group is their smiles. They're so excited to see me in the morning, and it's so fun to be teaching them. I mean, I'm incorporating puppets, and in person, they can see my arm, but with my puppets at home with my screen, you know, they can't see. So they're like, wait a minute, is that a puppet? Is that what, like, how are you doing that? So it's been really cool with different things that I can incorporate that keep it a lot more engaging. My families have been amazing. They have been so supportive, and they are just helping their child along this unique journey. And they have become like my co-teachers. Kindergarten age kids can't really do things independently. So we are constantly communicating back and forth about how to do this. I upload a lot of videos on Seesaw explaining how I would do it, and the kids and the parents watch them together. And I have a unique perspective because not only am I teaching, but I have Everett, who is my 5-year-old on my roster. So not only am I teaching him, but I'm also his parent, and seeing him establish these connections with these kiddos. He's learning their names. He's unmuting to say good morning to a couple of his friends that he knows who they are. And that's also a really cool part in the morning when we take attendance. Each kid has learned how to unmute, say good morning or good afternoon, and then they mute again. They've done amazing with learning how to do that. They're problem solving. Sometimes all of a sudden I'll hear, Mrs. Austin, I can't see you, because some other kid has talked and taken my spot on their iPads. So they say, okay, leave and come back. So these 5-year-olds, they leave the meeting, they come back in, they type our password or our nickname for our meeting, and then they pop back up. It's amazing to me that these 5-year-olds are so independent and self-sufficient with this new way of learning for them. But yeah, everybody has been so understanding. The parents have been so flexible, and things change. I lost my internet the other day, and so I just had no internet. And I came back 5 minutes later, and all my kids were still sitting there. And I just couldn't believe that these 5-year-olds just waited patiently for me to come back. And they are surprising me every day with how well they are doing with this, and they are happy, they are learning. And as you can see behind me, I've got all my cool anchor charts. And so like Stacy said, I'm teaching the content. I'm right on pace with, I touched base with Hillary Huberts at Century Park, since I have all the Century Park kids, and I'm right on track with her to make that transition as easy as possible if any of my kids leave me, which I would be so sad to leave, because they've become my kids. From day one, they're my kids. And so I started thinking, what if they go back to in person? They're going to say, well, my teacher, you know, Mrs. Austin. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's going to break my heart when they leave me if they do. So yeah, it's just going really well. And I am so glad to be able to tell you how positive an experience it has been, but a tremendous amount of work. I've worked harder than I ever have with in person. We just naturally know how to teach in person. It comes naturally, and we know what to do. And just with being remote, it's pushing me to be creative for sure in my delivery of my content. But overall, it's going absolutely great. So thanks for listening.
Thanks, Brittany. Yeah, one last thing, I do also want to kind of hold up and celebrate KDL. We have a great partnership with Penn District Library here in Grandville. We always have, and they are such supporters of the schools. This summer, Chris Vogelar reached out to me and said, Scott, we have a bunch of hotspots that KDL has with the school, be able to use them. And so we jumped at that, not knowing what it was going to be like for us for the summer. We didn't use them a lot in the summer, and so I asked if we could hold on to them, and they've really been a lifesaver for us. When we hear of a family that has an issue, we have a couple of families that sadly are in homeless situations that are remote, that they just aren't comfortable with their kids in school for whatever reason. And so we've been able to provide those hotspots, people who have had spotty connections or other things. And so again, wraparound support, right? It's not something we do on our own, but we just have a great community to help make it all work. And great teachers, as you saw.
Well, I just want to thank the gals coming out tonight, because this is part of your evening time with your family also. And so you're representing the district, and we appreciate you taking the time to give us some feedback. So big time. Somehow we'll have to convey to all the teachers. You two are just two of the many that are represented today. So thank you so much. And I especially love Stacy's wardrobe. So, it is, you know,
I'm repping.
You know, the notice what is good, what is right. Right. So now we know that we're going to be faced with differences all the time. And that's what I see y'all doing. So good job. And stay healthy. Thank you. And Scott, thank you so much. You got a big job too, so we appreciate it.
It's just such a team effort.
Obviously, job. much for giving them, giving them that positive feedback, and listening to them.
You're 70 hours. Like, you're not exaggerating.
No, they're working and they're working all the time. And I heard a snarky comment once last week from somebody about how they might not be on with their kids all afternoon like we are in person, right? But they're working with small groups and they're working with families. And it's not just in the afternoon. They've completely broken down schedule barriers and are giving certainly more than they need to right now.
There's another guy sitting back there too.
They have saved us in a number of occasions.
All of it back there.
Yep, for sure. Thank you for that, Chris.
I also want to say thank you to Stacy for helping me so much with the training. It means so much, I think, to your peers to have the peer teach you and give you the lead and hold your hand and work you through versus having it come top down. Like having you there, I know is very valuable for a lot of your colleagues. So thank you so much for that. And to Brittany, thank you for sharing the story this year. Because I think you are proof that we were able to get through something hard. You came in front of us, you told us what you needed and why it was important for us to hear your voice, and you shared a very personal story of your family. I'm so happy that it's working out for you. So I just want to appreciate you for sharing that and putting in all the effort to make it come true too. And be for your colleagues as well. So thank you to you guys and really to everyone. We have one question.
Yeah.
How about the middle school and high school? How are they doing?
Yeah, so we'll get to them next.
Okay.
I want to break it up a little bit just because the model is different, right? They're figuring it out as well. But the difference is they're figuring out differently because they're straddling a little bit.
Yeah.
Right? So we'll get to them next.
Okay. Awesome.
Thank you. All right. So here we are, the end of the meeting. Our next meeting obviously is on 5. Unbelievable. We're gonna go. Okay. And everybody agree? Oh my God. Yeah, how do you?